Commander Elias Vance opened his eyes to darkness and pain. His head was pounding. His ribs felt broken. The taste of blood filled his mouth. For a long moment, he did not know where he was or how he had gotten there. Then the memories came back like a flood. His ship, the warning alarms, the flash of enemy weapons cutting through space, the terrible sound of metal breaking apart, the crash. He had been flying a simple reconnaissance mission near the border of Sithrani space. Everyone knew the Sithrani were dangerous. Their empire stretched across 100 star systems, and they viewed humans as nothing more than insects. Violent insects that spread too fast and talked too much. The two species had never been at war, but they had never been friends either. Humans who entered Sithrani territory rarely came back. Elias tried to move and found that he could not. Heavy chains held his wrists and ankles. He was lying on a cold stone floor in a small cell. The walls were made of black crystal that seemed to swallow light. A faint purple glow came from somewhere above him, just enough to see the bars of his prison. He was alive. That surprised him. The Sithrani did not usually keep human prisoners. Hours passed. Or maybe days. It was impossible to tell in this place without windows or clocks. Guards came sometimes. They were tall and thin, with skin like polished silver, and eyes that glowed soft white. They never spoke to him. They brought water and something that might have been food, and left without a word. Elias learned quickly that he was not alone in this prison. Other cells lined the long corridor outside his own. He could hear the sounds of other prisoners. Some of them cried. Some of them screamed. Most of them simply waited in silence for whatever end was coming. One prisoner in a nearby cell told Elias where they were. This was the Obsidian Spire, a prison tower on the Sithrani homeworld of Valanthos Prime. The prisoners here were criminals, spies, pirates, and soldiers captured in border conflicts. They came from dozens of different species across the galaxy. None of them expected to leave alive. Elias did not give up hope. That was not in his nature. Humans were stubborn creatures. They did not accept death easily. He tested his chains every day, looking for weakness. He studied the guards and their patterns. He watched and waited and planned. But then something happened that changed everything. It began on what he guessed was his 5th night in the prison. A sound drifted through the dark corridors. At first, Elias thought he was dreaming. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was a voice, but it was also music. Someone was singing. The melody was strange and beautiful. It rose and fell like waves on an ocean. It seemed to contain colors and shapes and feelings that went beyond simple notes. The song was sad, incredibly deeply sad. It spoke of loneliness and longing without using any words that Elias could understand. He pressed himself against the bars of his cell and listened with his whole being. Around him, the other prisoners reacted very differently. The alien in the cell across from him covered his ears and curled into a ball. Another prisoner down the hall began to scream. Others pressed their hands against their heads as if the sound was causing them terrible pain. But Elias felt no pain. He felt only the emotion carried in that alien voice. And that emotion was overwhelming. The singer was close now. Elias could see a figure walking slowly down the corridor. She was Sithrani, tall and elegant, wearing robes of deep blue that flowed like water around her. Her silver skin seemed to glow from within. Her hair was long and white, floating around her shoulders as if gravity had forgotten her. She was the most beautiful being Elias had ever seen. She sang as she walked, her eyes closed, her face peaceful. The song poured from her throat like liquid starlight. Each note was perfect. Each phrase was filled with meaning that Elias could feel, even if he could not understand. The other prisoners continued to suffer. The frequencies of her voice were designed for Sithrani ears. To most other species, the harmonics caused physical pain. Some frequencies were too high. Others were too low. The layered tones created interference patterns that made alien brains hurt, but human ears were different. Humans had evolved on a world full of sounds. Their hearing range was wider than most species in the galaxy. They could perceive frequencies that others could not. More importantly, humans had spent thousands of years creating their own music. They understood rhythm and harmony, and the way emotion could be woven into sound. Elias did not just hear the Sithrani woman singing. He understood her. She was lonely. She was grieving. She was crying out into the darkness, hoping someone would hear her, knowing that no one ever would. And then she opened her eyes and saw Elias watching her. She stopped walking. The song died in her throat. Her white eyes went wide with shock. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other through the bars. The human prisoner with blood on his face and chains on his wrists. The alien woman with starlight in her voice and sorrow in her heart. "You are not in pain," she said. Her speaking voice was musical too, but softer. "You heard me sing, and you are not in pain." Elias shook his head slowly. "No pain, only. I felt what you were feeling. Your song is beautiful, and very sad." Her composure cracked. Just for a second, Elias saw something raw and vulnerable flash across her perfect silver face. Then she rebuilt her walls and became cold and distant once more. "That is impossible," she said. "No alien can understand the soul songs. They are sacred. They are ours alone." "I do not understand the words," Elias admitted, "but I understand the feeling. You are lonely. You sing because you hope someone will hear you, but no one ever does." The woman took a step backward, as if he had struck her. Her eyes searched his face for lies, and found none. "Who are you?" she whispered. "My name is Elias Vance. I am a human, and I think I am supposed to die here soon." She did not confirm or deny this. Instead, she did something strange. She bowed her head slightly, the smallest gesture of respect. "I am Alindra Vel Sithros," she said, "daughter of the Emperor, princess of the Sithrani sovereignty." Then she turned and walked away, her blue robes flowing behind her. But at the end of the corridor, she stopped and looked back at him one more time. "I will return human," she said. "I have never met anyone who could hear me before." The darkness swallowed her, and Elias was alone again. But something had changed. In this prison of silence and despair, he had found something unexpected, a reason to stay alive. Princess Alindra returned the next night just as she had promised. And the night after that, and the night after that at first, she kept her distance. She stood outside his cell like a scientist studying a strange new creature. She asked questions in her musical voice, and Elias answered honestly. He told her about Earth and its blue oceans. He told her about human cities and human music, and the way his people had always looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. She listened with those glowing white eyes. And slowly, night by night, she began to change. "My people believe humans are dangerous," she said one evening. "They say your kind spreads across the galaxy like a disease. You fight wars. You destroy worlds. You consume everything in your path." Elias nodded slowly. "Some of that is true. Humans have done terrible things. We are not perfect. But we have also created beautiful things. Art, music, stories. We love and we grieve and we hope. We are more than just our worst moments." Alindra was quiet for a long time after that. Then she asked a question that surprised him. "Do you know about our music?" "Nothing," Elias admitted. "Your people do not share such things with outsiders. Your language is forbidden to us. Any human who tries to learn it is put to death." "That is true," she said. "The soul songs are sacred. They contain the history and emotions of our entire civilization. To speak our language is to touch the heart of our culture. We do not allow outsiders to have that power." "Then why do you sing in the prison?" Elias asked. "Why sing where so many aliens can hear you?" The princess looked away. For the first time, she seemed uncertain, vulnerable. "Because no one really hears me," she whispered. "The songs cause pain to other species. They cover their ears and wait for me to pass. Even my own people cannot truly hear what I sing. The ability to feel the soul songs was lost long ago. Only the royal bloodline still carries the gift, and I am the last of my generation." Elias understood then. He understood the weight she carried. Your people hear the music but not the meaning, he said softly. They think your songs are just tradition, just pretty sounds. But you are pouring your heart into every note, and no one notices. Lindra's silver skin seemed to pale. She gripped the bars of his cell with both hands and stared at him with something close to desperation. How do you know that? She demanded. How can you possibly know that? Because I heard it in your voice. The loneliness, the grief. You have been singing into silence your whole life. Tears formed in her eyes. Not water, but small drops of liquid silver that rolled down her cheeks. Elias had not known that Cithrony could cry. Perhaps they had forgotten how. My people removed emotion from themselves centuries ago, she said, her voice shaking. They thought feelings made them weak. They engineered themselves to be cold and logical. Only the royal family was allowed to keep the old ways, so that someone could preserve the soul songs. But now? She laughed bitterly. Now I am a relic. A museum piece. I sing songs that no one understands. Two audiences that cannot feel. I understand, Elias said. I feel what you feel when you sing. I know. She wiped the silver tears from her face. That is why I keep coming back. You are the first person in my entire life who has truly heard me. You, a human prisoner waiting for death. Is that not strange? The universe has a strange sense of humor, Elias agreed. They talked for hours that night. Alendra told him about her childhood in the Crystal Palace, surrounded by servants who could not feel and parents who had forgotten how. She told him about learning the ancient songs from recordings of her grandmother, who had died before Alendra was born. She told him about the endless formal ceremonies where she sang to crowds of thousands, and not one of them understood that she was screaming inside. Elias told her about human music. He described orchestras and concerts. He talked about love songs and battle hymns and sad melodies that made people weep. He explained how humans used music to express things that words could not capture. Your species fascinates me, Alendra said. You are violent and dangerous, but you are also ... this. Creative, emotional, alive in ways my people have forgotten. Maybe that is why your people fear us, Elias suggested. Not because we are violent, but because we remind them of what they gave up. The princess stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached through the bars and took his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, like polished metal, but her grip was gentle. You will be executed in 42 days, she said quietly. My father has already signed the order. There is nothing I can do to stop it. Elias felt his heart grow heavy, but he did not let fear show on his face. I figured as much. But I want to give you something before you die. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small crystal that glowed with inner light. This is a language shard. It contains the foundations of our tongue, the basic sounds, the grammar, the way emotions are woven into speech. Elias looked at the crystal with wide eyes. You said learning your language is punishable by death. You are already going to die, she said with a sad smile. What does it matter now? But this is important. I want you to learn. I want you to speak to me in my own language before the end. I want to know if it is truly possible for another species to understand us. She pressed the crystal into his palm and closed his fingers around it. Prove them wrong, she whispered. Prove that humans are more than what they say. Prove that you can do what everyone believes is impossible. Elias asked. Why does this matter so much to you? Alendra looked at him with eyes full of silver tears. Because if you can learn our language, it means connection is possible. It means I am not as alone as I thought. It means there is hope, even in a universe that has forgotten how to feel. She stood up and stepped back from the bars. 42 days. Elias Vance. Learn fast. Then she was gone, vanishing into the shadows like a ghost. Elias looked down at the glowing crystal in his hand. He thought about everything she had told him. The forbidden language. The impossible task. The execution waiting at the end. 40-2 days to learn what no human had ever learned. Most people would have given up before they started. Most people would have said it could not be done. But Elias was not most people. He was human, and humans did not believe in impossible. He activated the crystal and began to learn. The Sithrani. Language was not like any human tongue. It did not work with simple words and sentences. Every sound had multiple meanings, depending on pitch, tone, and the emotion behind it. Speaking Sithrani was not just talking, it was singing. Every single word was a tiny piece of music. Elias discovered this on his first day of study, and it nearly broke him. The language shard contained thousands of lessons. Basic sounds, simple phrases, the rules of grammar and harmony. But the shard had been designed for Sithrani children, who were born with the right vocal cords and the right instincts. It had never been meant for a human. The first word Elias tried to learn meant hello. It required him to produce 3 different tones at the same time while breathing in a specific pattern. His throat simply could not do it. He tried for hours until his voice turned rough and painful. The sound that came out was closer to choking than speaking. The other prisoners thought he had gone insane. They heard him in his cell, making strange noises, coughing and gasping and trying again and again. Some of them laughed. Others shouted at him to stop. One alien in a nearby cell asked if he was dying. "Not yet," Elias replied in a ragged voice. "Not yet." He slept for a few hours and woke up with his throat on fire. He drank his water ration and started again. Day after day, the struggle continued. Elias broke down the language into its smallest pieces. He learned that Sithrani had 12 bass tones, compared to the 7 that humans used in music. He learned that emotion was not just added to words, but was built into the structure of the language itself. A sentence spoken with joy had different grammar than the same sentence spoken with sorrow. It was beautiful. It was impossible. And Elias refused to stop. His voice gave out on the 6th day. He could barely whisper. The guards noticed his silence and seemed confused. Prisoners usually screamed and begged. They did not go quiet and make peace with death. But Elias was not making peace. He was resting, recovering, planning his next attempt. Alindra visited him that night, found him mouthing words without sound. His lips moving in patterns she recognized.
"You damaged your voice?"
she said with concern in her eyes. "You pushed too hard." Elias smiled and shrugged. He pointed to his throat and shook his head. He could not speak, but his eyes said everything. "I am not giving up." "Humans are strange creatures," Alindra murmured. "Any other species would have stopped by now. The pain alone should have convinced you this was hopeless." Elias picked up the language shard and held it up. Then he pointed to his head and made a gesture that meant thinking or learning. "You are still studying? Even without being able to practice?" He nodded. Alindra sat down on the floor outside his cell. She was quiet for a long moment, watching him with those glowing white eyes. "I did not expect this," she admitted. "I thought you would try for a few days and then accept defeat. I thought you were like everyone else. But you are not, are you?" Elias shook his head. He wished he could explain. He wished he could tell her that humans had a word for this. Stubbornness, determination, the refusal to quit, even when everything said you should. It was not always a good quality. Sometimes, it led humans into foolish choices and unnecessary pain. But sometimes, just sometimes, it led them to achieve things that no one thought possible. His voice returned after 4 days of rest. It was rough and weak, but it was there. He started practicing again immediately. This time he was smarter about it. He did not try to produce perfect Sithrani sounds. Instead, he focused on getting close enough to be understood. He used every trick he knew from human music. He breathed from his stomach instead of his chest. He relaxed his throat and let the sounds flow naturally instead of forcing them. Slowly, painfully, progress came. By day 20, he could speak simple phrases. His accent was terrible. His harmonics were all wrong. But when he looked at Alindra and said the word for friend in her language, she burst into tears. "That was awful," she said through her silver tears. "Your pronunciation was like listening to a broken instrument. But I understood you. I actually understood you." Elias grinned despite his aching throat. "Then let us keep going." She began to teach him directly after that. She would speak phrases slowly, letting him hear each component. She corrected his mistakes gently but firmly. She made him repeat difficult sounds, dozens of times until they started to feel natural. The other prisoners watched this. Strange relationship developed with confusion and suspicion. A human and a Sithrani princess, talking for hours each night. The prisoner learning the forbidden tongue while the princess cried tears of joy and sorrow. Why are you doing this? One prisoner asked Elias during the day. You know, you're going to die anyway. Why torture yourself learning her language? Elias thought about the question carefully before answering. Because she asked me to, he said. Because she has been alone her whole life, singing to an empire that cannot hear her, and I can give her something no one else can. I can answer her. Even if it is just for a few weeks before I die, I can make her feel less alone. The other prisoner stared at him like he was speaking nonsense. That is the most human thing I have ever heard. Thank you, Elias said. By day 35, he could hold real conversations. His grammar was imperfect. His tones wavered and cracked. But meaning came through clearly. And more importantly, emotion came through. When he spoke to Alindra in her language, she could feel what he was feeling. The connection went both ways. You have done something remarkable, she told him on day 38. No alien has ever learned our tongue. The scholars said it was biologically impossible. But here you are, speaking to me in the language of my ancestors. I had a good teacher, Elias replied in Sithrani. His voice carried warmth and gratitude, and Alindra shivered as she felt those emotions wash over her. For more days, she whispered. For more days, until they take you to the Grand Resonance Chamber. My father will watch. The entire court will watch. And then, she could not finish the sentence. Elias reached through the bars and took her hand. Then I will make those for days count, he said. And when I stand in that chamber, I will not beg for my life. I will not curse your people or go to death with hate in my heart. What will you do? Alindra asked. Elias smiled. It was a strange smile, full of peace and determination.
I will sing.
The Grand Resonance Chamber was the most sacred place in the Sithrani Empire. It sat at the heart of the Crystal Palace, a vast circular hall with walls made of pure resonance stone. These ancient crystals had been gathering sound for 10,000 years. Every important speech, every royal decree, every soul song ever performed in this chamber had been absorbed into the walls and preserved forever. This was where Sithrani emperors were crowned. This was where treaties were signed and wars were declared. And this was where condemned prisoners were brought to speak their final words. Before death, Elias stood in the center of the chamber in chains. Guards surrounded him on all sides. Above him, hundreds of Sithrani nobles sat in crystalline seats that rose in rings toward the distant ceiling. Their silver faces were cold and expressionless. They looked down at him like he was an insect about to be crushed. On the highest platform sat the imperial family. Emperor Valros Valsithros was ancient and terrible, his white eyes burning with cold authority. Beside him sat his advisors and generals. And there, at the edge of the platform, sat Princess Alindra in her blue robes. Her face was a mask of royal composure. But Elias could see her hands trembling in her lap. He could see the tightness around her eyes. She was fighting with everything she had not to show her fear and grief. Human, the emperor spoke, and his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. You have been found guilty of trespassing in Sithrani space. You have been found guilty of espionage against the sovereignty. For these crimes, you will die. Elias said nothing. He simply stood and listened. By ancient tradition, you are permitted final words. Speak now, and let your voice be preserved in the Resonance Archive so that future generations may remember the fate of those who defy our empire. The emperor gestured with one long silver hand. The guard stepped back, giving Elias room. This was the moment. Elias had 42 days of preparation leading to this single chance. He thought of everything Alindra had taught him. He thought of the songs she had sung in the prison corridors. He thought of her tears and her loneliness and her desperate hope that someone, somewhere, might truly hear her. He looked up at her. and their eyes met across the vast chamber. She gave a tiny shake of her head. Do not do this. They will kill you faster. Do not reveal what you have learned. But Elias had not spent 42 days learning the impossible just to waste it on fear. He opened his mouth, and he began to sing. The sound that came from his throat was not perfect. It was rough and human, cracked in places where Sithrani voices would be smooth. His harmonics wavered. His tones were not quite right. But the words were real. The language was ancient Sithrani, the Deepsong dialect, that had not been spoken in 1,000 years, and the meaning was clear. He sang about a man lost in darkness. He sang about a voice that reached him through the void. He sang about a princess who carried the weight of an entire civilization's forgotten heart. He sang about loneliness and hope and the desperate need to connect. Across impossible distances, the chamber fell completely silent. Every Sithrani in the room froze in shock. The Emperor rose from his throne, his white eyes blazing with fury and disbelief. Guards reached for their weapons. Advisors shouted in alarm, but Elias kept singing. He poured everything he had into the song. All the pain of his damaged throat, all the fear of death that he had pushed aside for weeks, all the gratitude he felt for the princess who had given him this gift, all the stubborn human determination that had carried him through the impossible task. And then he sang the forbidden truth. He sang that the Sithrani had made a terrible mistake when they removed emotion from themselves. He sang that they had become hollow and empty, going through the motions of life without truly living. He sang that their princess had been screaming into silence for her entire existence, and not one of them had heard her. He sang that emotion was not weakness. It was strength. It was the fire that made life worth living. It was the bridge between souls that turned strangers into family. And finally he sang directly to Elendra. He sang that she was not alone anymore. He sang that he heard her. He sang that even if he died in the next moment, he was grateful for the chance to answer her songs with one of his own. The chamber erupted into chaos. Silence him. The Emperor roared. This is blasphemy. This is corruption. Kill him now. Guards rushed forward with weapons drawn. Elias closed his eyes and prepared for death. But then another voice joined his. Elendra stood on the royal platform. She was singing. Her voice rose above the chaos like a beam of pure light. She sang in harmony with the human prisoner, weaving her perfect tones around his imperfect ones. Creating something new and strange and beautiful, she sang the response that the soul songs had always demanded but never received. She sang that she heard him too. She sang that he had given her the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. She sang that, for the first time in her life, she did not feel alone. The guards stopped moving. Everyone stopped moving. Because something was happening that had not happened in 10,000 years. The resonance stones in the walls began to glow. The crystals that had absorbed every sound. In this chamber, since the founding of the Empire, were waking up. They pulsed with inner light, responding to the duet of human and Sithrani voices. And from deep within the stones, another voice emerged. It was ancient. It was powerful. It was the voice of the first Sithrani queen, recorded in prophecy millennia ago. When the silent ones learned to hear, the voice intoned, and the voiceless learned to speak, the sovereignty shall remember what it means to feel. In that day the old ways shall return, and the empire shall be reborn. The glow spread through the entire chamber. Every noble, every guard, every advisor felt something they had not felt in centuries. Emotion. Real, raw, overwhelming emotion. Some of them wept for the first time in their lives. Others laughed. Others simply stood in shock as feelings they had engineered out of themselves came flooding back. The Emperor fell back into his throne. His ancient face twisted with confusion and something that might have been fear. "What is this?" he demanded. "What have you done?" Elias stopped singing. Elendra stopped singing. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of the glowing crystals. "I answered her," Elias said simply. His voice was rough and broken from the effort of singing. "That is all. I heard her songs, and I answered them. Is that not what the soul songs were always meant for? The Emperor had no response. For the first time in his long reign, he had no idea what to do. Alendra descended from the platform, her blue robes flowing behind her. Guards moved to stop her, but she walked past them as if they did not exist. She crossed the vast chamber floor and stood before the human prisoner in chains. You did it, she whispered, silver tears streaming down her face. You actually did it. I told you I would, Elias replied. She reached out and touched his face with her cool silver hand. What happens now? She asked. Elias looked up at the confused and emotional Sithrani all around them. He looked at the glowing crystals and the ancient prophecy that had just been fulfilled. He looked at the Emperor who could not kill him without defying sacred law. Now, he said, everything changes. The days following the events in the Grand Resonance Chamber were filled with confusion and conflict. The Sithrani Empire had been shaken to its foundations. A human prisoner had sung in the sacred tongue. A princess had answered him. An ancient prophecy had awakened. And suddenly, an entire civilization was feeling emotions they had suppressed for centuries. Not everyone welcomed the change. Many Sithrani nobles demanded that Elias be executed immediately. They called him a corrupter, a disease that had infected their princess with human weakness. They argued that the prophecy was false, that the glowing crystals were some kind of trick, that everything could go back to normal if they simply killed the human and pretended none of it had happened, but they could not kill him. The Resonance Archive had recorded the prophecy for all to hear. The sacred law was clear. When the prophecy was fulfilled, the one who fulfilled it was protected by ancient tradition. To execute Elias now would be to reject 10,000 years of Sithrani history. Emperor Velrose struggled with this reality for weeks. He called councils and demanded solutions. He consulted priests and scholars and historians. Every one of them told him the same thing. The human had done what the prophecy foretold. There was no legal way to execute him. Finally, the Emperor summoned Elias to his private chambers. The room was smaller than Elias had expected. It was lined with old books and ancient crystals, more like a scholar's study than a throne room. The Emperor sat in a simple chair, looking tired and very old. You have created a problem for me, human, Velrose said. That was not my intention, Elias replied carefully. His Sithrani had improved greatly in the weeks since the chamber. He could speak almost fluently now, though his accent would probably never be perfect. What was your intention? Elias considered the question seriously. To answer a lonely voice, nothing more. The Emperor studied him with those ancient white eyes. My daughter has been different since that day. She smiles. She laughs. She speaks of hope and change and possibility. I have not seen her like this since she was a small child. Is that a bad thing? I do not know. The Emperor leaned back in his chair with a heavy sigh. My people engineered emotion out of themselves because they believed it made them weak. For centuries we have been cold and logical and efficient. We built an empire that spans 100 stars. We conquered enemies who seemed more powerful than us. We survived while other civilizations fell. But you lost something too, Elias said quietly. Yes, we lost something. Velrose was silent for a long moment. The prophecy speaks of the empire being reborn. My advisors are terrified of what that might mean. Some of them think it means destruction. Others think it means revolution. No one knows what happens when an entire species suddenly starts feeling again. Change is always frightening, Elias said. Humans know this well. We have gone through many periods of great change in our history. Some of them were terrible. Some of them were wonderful. Usually they were both at the same time. And how did your people survive these changes? Elias thought of everything he knew about human history. The wars and revolutions. The discoveries and disasters. The countless times humanity had faced destruction and somehow found a way forward. We adapted, he said. We held on to each other. We remembered that we were stronger together than alone. And we refused to give up, even when giving up seemed like the only sensible choice. The Emperor nodded slowly. My daughter says the same things. She says humans are not the monsters we believe them to be. She says you are stubborn and emotional and sometimes foolish, but also brave and creative and full of unexpected wisdom. Your daughter is very kind. My daughter is in love with you. Elias felt his heart skip. He had suspected this was true, but hearing it spoken aloud by the Emperor himself was something else entirely. I know that look, Velrose said, with something that might have been amusement. You feel the same way? I do, Elias admitted. There was no point in lying. This creates another problem. A princess of the Sithrani sovereignty cannot marry an alien. It has never been done. My people would never accept it, and perhaps your people need to change. The words hung in the air between them. Elias knew he was pushing his luck. The Emperor could still find ways to make his life difficult, even if he could not legally execute him. But Valrose did not seem angry. Instead, he almost seemed relieved. I am going to do something that no emperor has ever done, he said. I am going to appoint a human as ambassador to our empire. You will live in the palace. You will advise my daughter, and eventually, I suppose, my council. You will help us understand your species and perhaps help your species understand us. Elias bowed his head in gratitude. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Many of my people will hate you. Some will try to kill you. You will face danger every day for the rest of your life. I have faced danger before. Yes, I suppose you have. The Emperor stood and walked to a window that looked out over the crystal city below. There is one thing I still do not understand. When you were in that prison, when you knew you were going to die, why did you spend your final days learning our language? You could have used that time to escape. You could have used it to make peace with your death. Instead, you tortured yourself trying to do something impossible. Elias joined him at the window. The city was beautiful, all spires and bridges made of glowing crystal. He wondered what it would be like to live here, surrounded by a people who were just beginning to remember how to feel. Because she asked me to, he said. Because proving her right was more important than saving my own life. Because humans do not believe in impossible. We only believe in not yet. Not yet. It means the thing you want has not happened, but it still might. Every challenge, every obstacle, every wall in our way is just something we have not figured out how to overcome yet. We do not accept limits. We do not surrender to circumstances. We keep trying until we succeed or until we die, and sometimes even death does not stop us. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. I think I understand now why my ancestors feared your people. It was not your violence or your expansion. It was this. This refusal to accept reality as it is, this stubborn belief that anything can change if you push hard enough. He turned to look at Elias directly. That is a terrifying quality in an enemy. But perhaps it will be a valuable quality in a friend. Elias smiled. I hope so. In the years that followed, everything did change. The Sithrani people slowly relearned the emotions they had abandoned so long ago. It was not easy. There was conflict and confusion and growing pains that lasted for decades. But there was also joy and connection and a richness of experience that had been missing from their lives. Elias married Alindra in a ceremony that was broadcast across the galaxy. It was the first union between a human and a Sithrani, and it would not be the last. Their children carried both bloodlines, able to sing the soul songs with human determination and Sithrani grace, and throughout the Empire. A new song began to spread. It was sung in two voices, two languages. Two traditions woven together into something neither species could have created alone. It spoke of a prisoner who refused to surrender, and a princess who refused to be silent. It spoke of the power of connection and the strength found in answering voices in the darkness. Elias heard this song many times over the years, and each time it made him smile. He would look at Alindra, his partner in his love and his answer to loneliness, and she would look back at him with silver tears of happiness in her eyes. Do you ever regret it? She asked him once late in their lives. All those days in that prison cell, destroying your voice trying to learn something impossible. Elias took her hand and held it close. Never, he said. It was never impossible. It was just not yet. Across the stars, the song continued, carrying hope to everyone who heard it. a human song and a Sithrani song forever intertwined, proving that no distance was too great and no silence too deep to be overcome by two voices determined to find each other.